the Salsa Spearfish. It's been Salsa's XC-focused bike for more than a decade, and today they launched their fourth iteration of the bike. Let's talk about it. So launched back in 2011, the Spearfish has always been Salsa's short travel full suspension bike, but it also shared a very similar design to the Horse Thief over the years. This is until, well, this iteration, but more on that soon. So the original Spearfish was an 80mm rear travel, 100mm front travel XC bike with a single pivot design and flex stays. Yes, flex stays in 2011 instead of that pivoting rear axle that you see on this one. It was built around Salsa's new tagline at the time, Adventure by Bike, but it definitely leaned towards speed and endurance racing. Think the popular 24-hour races of that era. 24 hours in the stage, 24 hours of Old Pueblo, what have you. In 2014, they redesigned the bike with Dave Weagle's split pivot design. So the key change here was, well, the new pivot layout, placing the rearmost pivot directly in line with the rear axle. It was still aluminum, still had 80mm of rear travel, but the updated geometry made it a more capable bike. A year later, the carbon version was introduced. So let's fast forward to 2019, and the third iteration of the Spearfish was launched. Its industrial design certainly stood out, but it also embraced a more progressive downcountry style geometry, especially for the time, with 100mm of rear travel, 120mm up front, a flip chip, and a 67.8-degree head angle in the low setting. It also had a massive main triangle, room for 2 bottles on all sizes. So we're now all caught up until today. But before we do dive into this new version, I do want to take a quick moment to let you all know that this video is supported in part by Gunnison Crested Butte. Gunnison County has long been a hub for gravel cyclists. Just look back to the 1970s when riders were tackling Pearl Pass on clunkers. While times have certainly changed, the county remains as expansive as ever. It's 1.5 times the size of Delaware, with most of that land being public. In fact, there are over 1,100 miles of dirt and gravel roads, perfect for piecing together a multi-day bikepacking trip or just heading out for a quick hour-long spin. So, to plan your next trip or just to inquire, make sure to click the card in the top right corner or else follow the link in the description below. So it's been 6 years since we've seen a refresh, a geo refresh of the Spearfish, and let's be real here, the world is a completely different place between the old version and this one. But the new version is not only fun, it's also ahead of the curve. So the geometry certainly hits a sweet spot, efficient for long days in the saddle, but far more capable than you'd expect from a traditional XC bike. So one of the biggest changes you will notice is in the stack and reach. So I'd say the industry trend of having longer reach and lower stack is one of, I'd say, the best evolutions in bike design, at least in my opinion. So I tested a medium which has a 470mm reach and a 608mm stack. So the result is a more aggressive, inspiring ride. So the closer my hands are to the ground, I'd say the more connected I feel to the terrain that I'm riding. So with a long front center and a short stem, the bike truly does inspire confidence, whether descending fast terrain or picking through kind of that low speed tech. Even with a relatively high 31mm bottom bracket drop, it still feels very planted, but retains a certain playful characteristic, certainly not found on any bike that I've actually pedaled in this category. So the 430mm chainstay and a 770-ish millimeter front center combined to a 1,200mm wheelbase in the high flip chip setting, and with a 66.3-degree head angle, 77.3 seat angle, this bike is clearly not your average XC race rig. So all build options come in at 120mm of rear travel and 120mm of front, but both ends can be tuned down to 100mm, and the frame is also optimized for a 130mm fork if you wanted even more length up front. And it should be noted, say you do want to pare that down to 100mm rear end, 100mm front, you are going to shorten the bike up a little bit. It might actually play a little bit nicer on your, say, super competitive XC marathon race series. Spec-wise, the bike is built around a 148mm boost spacing. So yeah, so long Super Boost. It was really good to know ya. It fits 2.0 to 2.4 inch tires and actually cleared a 2.6 inch Maxxis Forecaster, which actually measures 2.4. And I feel like it had enough tire clearance for mud, so I probably would feel comfortable running a 2.5. All right, so I am spilling coffee over here. Wow, okay. So the bike also comes with a universal derailleur hanger rear end. It also comes with internal housing and brake line routing, 2 different flip chip settings, a high and low, more on that soon. Press fit 92mm bottom bracket, 30.9mm seat post diameter, and a 34 tooth max chainring clearance. Plus, you've got loads of space inside the main triangle, 2 bottles, and a big custom frame bag. And in my opinion, a really sleek looking industrial design here. All right, so sizing. This is certainly one of my favorite aspects of the new Spearfish because, well, it fits me. It fits me really well. So when I saw the reach and stack numbers on the geo chart, I had a good feeling that the medium would be right. And well, I was spot on. Here's an overlay of the medium Spearfish compared to the medium pivot Mach 4 SL. So if you saw my review of the Mach 4 SL last year, you'll remember I had some sizing issues and ended up actually swapping the medium for a large. Now, here is the large Mach 4 SL next to the medium Spearfish. Pretty much identical length, right? For reference here, I'm 5'9.5" with a +2 ape index and a 32-inch inseam, and the medium Spearfish fit me like a glove right away without changing anything. Unlike the XC race fit of the pivot, the Spearfish felt more like I was in the bike rather than perched on top of it. And thanks to the steep seat tube angle, the fit certainly stayed balanced and comfortable from all-day pedaling to steep, punchy climbs. So I've been riding a Spearfish in some way, shape, or form for over a decade now. So I bought the green anodized alloy version back in 2014 when the V2 was just launched. So 2 years after that, I picked up the carbon version, and then I ended up setting the Colorado Trail Race record on that, followed by the record on the Arizona Trail Race the next year. I also won the Colorado Trail Race on the 3rd generation Spearfish in 2021, plus thousands upon thousands of day rides and bikepacking miles on these things. So yeah, I spent some time, an abundance of time on these bikes. That success actually also led me to a brief sponsorship with Salsa Cycles, which ended not long after my YouTube channel, or this YouTube channel, started gaining traction. Salsa has always prioritized that frame space. And honestly, that is one of the reasons why I keep going back to it. That and, of course, something else that I've really come to appreciate, the split pivot suspension design. So what is split pivot? Well, different brands use different suspension layouts. Some are open and free to use, while others are developed in-house, or some are licensed. So in Salsa's case, they license Dave Weagle's split pivot design, which is also used by Da Vinci. So split pivot places the rear axle and suspension pivot on the same axis. So this basically allows braking and pedaling forces to kind of act independently. So this means that the suspension stays active under braking and remains efficient under power. It's actually been a staple in Salsa's lineup of full suspension bikes for years now and offers a real great balance of traction control and long distance capability. So when I actually spoke to some of the folks at Salsa, they actually said their goal for the new Spearfish was pretty simple. Build a bike that still handled really well after, say, 12+ hours on the trail and reduce overall weight. So they knew that sticking with split pivot would actually add about 100 or 150 grams versus switching to a flex stay. Even so, they managed to shave up 540 grams off the frame. So what allowed this was the ability to decouple the Spearfish with their other platform, the Horse Thief, a more trail-oriented bike, which essentially both of them shared the same chassis in the past. So it is worth noting that Salsa actually released 2 different types of carbon layups with this new version. You have the Deluxe version, which is the one I tested here, and you also have the standard version. So you won't notice any visual difference, and Salsa also says it offers a similar stiffness, but the real change is all in the carbon itself. The Deluxe actually uses a higher modulus carbon, which actually allows for thinner tubes in kind of key areas without actually sacrificing strength. So it doesn't require a different mold per se than the standard, but it does shave weight. So the medium Deluxe frame set comes in at 1,940 grams, while the standard version weighs 2,195 grams. So for comparison's sake here, the V3 frame, the medium, was 2,482 grams. So that's quite a bit of reduction there. It's certainly not the lightest in the XC category, but still very respectable considering the bike's capability. That all said, the alloy version of the Spearfish, that tried and true alloy version that was there since the beginning, it's gone. As Salsa mentions, that carbon allowed them to achieve their weight savings goals and performance gains with the flexibility of what carbon shapes can offer. So this is not a great start to my 2025 prediction of seeing more unique alloy bikes hit the market, but there's still plenty of time. I think we've got 8 months left or so we'll see. So I logged about 150-ish miles on the new Spearfish this spring, riding Colorado single track around Salida, Fruita, and of course here in Gunnison. And I even found myself reaching for this bike on gravel rides before trails were melted out here. So that alone should tell you something, right? It's fast enough to kind of hang with some drop bar bikes. All right, so my first ride on the new Spearfish was up on S Mountain in Salida. First rides always reveal a lot, right? Though I try not to lean too hard on early impressions. That said, after 2 months on this bike, those initial thoughts kind of held up. So I started by climbing a road to access some kind of chunky single track. It snowed overnight and there was a little bit of snow on the ground. So I was a little hesitant at first, but once most of it melted off, I certainly got more comfortable and, well, really kind of was impressed with the overall ride of the Spearfish. So as split pivot tends to do, the suspension tracked really well through rough terrain. Both wheels, front and back, were staying really well implanted, and the suspension made tough moves feel really easy, or maybe just possible. But what really stood out was the support after the initial travel was soaked up. So paired with the shorter rear end and relatively high bottom bracket, it actually allowed me to kind of keep pedaling through technical sections and cleaning one move after another, instead of kind of sinking into that mid-stroke, clipping a pedal on a rock, and then finding myself off the bike, walking the rest of that section. On that same ride, and well, kind of every ride since, I noticed kind of more pop and playfulness compared to the previous version. So the older Spearfish had a slightly shorter wheelbase and, well, a similar kind of rear end as far as length. So maybe it's lighter frame or the updated layup or just the suspension kind of working a little differently. I don't know. But when I hammered the pedals or descended quickly before powering up a quick roller, the bike not only held speed, but really responded extremely well with more power at high speeds. So that sensation is something you expect on maybe a hardtail or a gravel bike, but when it translates to a full suspension bike, usually they are XC bikes, well, you know you're on a rocket. I tested this on both the open and locked out suspension modes, and while I usually like to leave the shock open on single track, as I still think it's the most efficient way to actually ride a bike on single track, the stiffness when it was locked out on the new version really stood out. So unlike the older Spearfish, where there always seemed to be a bit of give when it was locked out, this certainly feels firm and really efficient. And that's something you'll really appreciate during long, say, wilderness detours on the Colorado Trail or stretches that you do ride on some dirt roads. So overall, it has a real sense of urgency, the kind of responsiveness that you want from a short travel XC rig. Could it be faster? Yeah, maybe, but with the long wheelbase, I'd say it's a small trade-off for that stability it offers at speed. And with the extended front center and steep seat tube angle, you get the best of both worlds. That bike is still keeping your weight centered and in a really good climbing position. I actually noticed this climbing up a super steep Powerline road the other day. All right, so what really sets this version of the Spearfish apart from previous models and really most XC bikes is that front center length. Like, look at this thing. It's so long. It really offers a level of stability that you don't usually get in, well, this class. And I haven't actually ridden the transition spur in a really long time, but the Spearfish really reminded me of its descending confidence right away. But the Spearfish just climbs better. Of course, it's still an XC bike. It's not going to soak up the biggest hits out there. But once you actually kind of dial in that rear rebound a little bit better, I think that you'll really be surprised at how well it handles rough descents. And briefly talking about fast and smooth trails here, well, yeah, this thing has no problem with that. I found myself going pretty quick, even without thinking about braking, and well, yeah, that's a good sign. So the overall ride quality leans solidly into that downcountry category, a trail bike attitude with XC race efficiency. It's hard to kind of define exactly, and maybe that is the point, but it's limited in travel, sure, but it certainly makes up for it with that progressive geometry that's inspired me to kind of ride harder, try new lines, and tackle stuff that I really wouldn't even think about on a traditional XC bike. Salsa continues to design bikes with adventure in mind. And while the new Spearfish is no exception, if and when I ride the Colorado Trail again, I'd still opt for a full suspension bike. And I still want something that is capable on descents, but something that really tracks better over rocky and rough ascents. And the Spearfish certainly fits that bill. So while I haven't actually taken the Spearfish out on an overnighter just yet, I did load it up and it feels really solid. Definitely more stiff than the Pivot Mach 4 SL. That Pivot Mach 4 had a lot of side-to-side movement, and it was just didn't handle weight as well as the Spearfish does. It also has more space and mounting options. More space even than the previous version, which is cool. Salsa is not making a dedicated frame bag for this version, but there are plenty of mounts inside the triangle for a custom frame bag, 2 bottles, or even 3 depending on your bottle and frame size. So there also is a two top tube mounts here for a direct mount top tube bag or a GPS mount. Plus, it still offers a nice handle right here for those opportunities when you get to hike next to your bike. When Salsa told me that they were actually going to send me this bike before launch, I was really excited. I got the deck and spec sheet, and they said they were going to send me the XO Access transmission, and I was like, great, this sounds awesome. But when the bike arrived, yeah, it had flight attendant. Not something I'd say bike packers would really consider, but I know it has certainly gained traction in the XC race world. I would have been perfectly happy with the GX build or even building up a frame set on my own, but I am glad I actually had the chance to test out the Deluxe carbon version. The lighter frame really does keep that overall weight down, which is kind of nice, I'm not gonna lie, even though I don't think weight matters as much as some other things. About flight attendant. It's pretty wild. The setup really was frustrating. I hate reading directions or watching videos for directions, but I had to because I didn't know that I had to set up the fork before everything else to pair it all together. But once I got it going, it worked as advertised. So Flight Attendant is RockShox's electronically controlled suspension system that basically adjusts the fork and rear shock in real time based on the terrain and rider input. So it uses a sensor in the fork, the shock, and in the crank to decide whether to stay open, go to the pedal mode, or full lockout, all without you actually touching a switch or a lever. It's clearly designed for racers, and I found it fun on some kind of high effort power hour laps at 18 road, but I actually pulled the batteries out at one point to test the bike without it, and thanks to the split pivot, I'd say the bike still climbs incredibly well even without a lockout. So while it is nice tech to showcase, I don't think I'd ever pay for it personally. I also felt like the SID fork had a lot of flex that I was not anticipating, because I've used this fork before, and I think just with this kind of geometry, you're pushing the fork a little bit more. So I definitely noticed that. Plus the red, I'm not a fan of the red. So the bike also came with the RockShox Reverb Access dropper post, the older version, but it's still super fast. The medium actually came with a more XC kind of travel at 150 millimeters, but I certainly could fit, I'd say 175 if I really wanted to there. And of course, it did come with the XO transmission access drivetrain. So I've actually had a few concerns with the transmission on other bikes over the past few months. but there's something to be said for riding it on a frame where it was kind of built around it. It really does shine here. That said, I still can't help but soft pedal when I shift. It's just kind of human nature. Anyone else in that boat? So the build also came with SRAM's new Motive brakes. They don't offer that bite like the Shimano XT brakes do, but for this kind of bike, I'm fine with that. Less brake, faster, right? So the WTB CZR frequency wheel set on this bike are incredibly light, another perk of a high-end or top-end spec. It also came with Terraval's new Camrock tires. I wasn't expecting much based on the tread, but they actually impressed me with their grip and rolling. And I ended up throwing the draw point tires on this bike, and I actually think those tires work really well on this bike as well. A little bit more bite and roll, still pretty darn well. Other details include a 35mm stem, 80mm carbon bars with I think it's a 20mm rise, WTB Silverado saddle, which I've actually come to really enjoy. So overall, it's hard to actually not like this bike, but there could be a few things that are done better. So in-frame storage. It's quickly becoming a standard feature on carbon frames for competing brands, and I'd love to see it on the Spearfish, especially given Salsa's commitment to bike packing. In-bike cargo certainly just feels like a natural fit, plus a really good spot to store your tools for day rides. Second, the fork. Yeah, Salsa mentions that they considered a 100mm and 120mm travel version of this bike, and while the rear shock can be swapped to adjust rear travel, I'd really love to try this bike with a 130mm fork, or at least just something a little bit more stiff. The latest SID is a much better version than the one I tested in 2015, but it still has a lot of flex, or enough flex that kind of distracted me in rougher terrain. And finally, in today's world, well, resources are time, and time is money, right? But building an alloy version, yeah, it might be one more thing that a brand would have to do. But with how expensive bikes have become, I really think offering an alloy version should be standard. It helps open the door to more riders, especially when wages aren't going up, but cost of everything else is. This is not only a call on Salsa, but other brands as well. I think the Specialized Chisel was a good example of implementing an alloy build with a full suspension bike. There are a lot of incredible bikes on the market right now, and realistically, most new bikes will make a lot of riders pretty darn happy. Bikes have really come a long way, but this might be one of the first times Salsa's really kind of ahead of the curve in what I'd call progressive design. I don't know of another bike that pairs a 66+ degree head tube angle with a 1200mm wheelbase that maxes out at 120mm of rear travel, quite like this. So add in proven split pivot suspension, huge frame space for bottles and bags, and well, a ride quality that just makes you want to keep pushing. It's a bike that doesn't just tick boxes on paper, but it really makes you want to ride more. If you prioritize long day pedaling efficiency, but still want a bike that kind of rips around, the new Spearfish is absolutely worth a look. That all said, we aren't looking at cheap prices here. They are expensive, especially the one I tested. Might even be the most expensive bike that I've ever reviewed. So the Deluxe XO build comes in at $11,499 USD. So the Deluxe GX Eagle version is $6,499, and the Deluxe frame set alone is $3,499. Probably the route I would go if I had a choice. The standard carbon transmission build is $4,999 USD, and there's also a Dior 12-speed carbon build. That standard is $3,999 USD. So a little bit easier on the bank account there. What do you all think about Spearfish? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you all so much for watching. And if you like what you saw in this video and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And if you want to help support this YouTube channel, everything we're doing at BIKEPACKING.com, you can do so by joining the Bikepacking Collective. The Collective offers a lot of awesome perks, including industry discounts, monthly giveaways, the twice-yearly Bikepacking Journal, and the all-new Base Camp. So, to learn a little bit more about the Bikepacking Collective, or to join, you can click on the card in the top right corner. You'll also find the link in the description below. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, pedal further.